So, good morning, everyone. My name is Al Borghese. I'm one of the partners here at Cerini Associates. We're going to go around to the panel, kind of introduce ourselves. We got Doug Rowe, partner at Sir Tillman Ballin. We got Ed Probst from Vanguard Benefits, and then we also have Jill Krumholtz, founder of Talent Management Solutions. Um, Doug, Jill, and Ed, do you guys each want to just say a little bit about each one of yourselves, and then we'll kind of take it from there? Doug, why don't we
Sure.
start with you?
Sure. Hope you can hear me. My name is Doug Rowe. I'm a partner in the law firm Sir Tillman Ballin, where I head the labor and employment practice group. In that capacity, I represent both for-profits and nonprofits. I help nonprofits, specifically since we're speaking to nonprofits today, comply with the wage and hour laws and the labor and employment laws, and help them get out of the trouble they've gotten into when they haven't complied. Doug Rowe.
Sounds
Thanks.
good. Jill?
Jill Krumholtz, founder and CEO of Talent Management Solutions, and my background and our business is around talent and talent management, HR consulting, and executive search. And I try to work with organizations before Doug needs to come in to to handle complicated legal issues.
Sounds good.
It's nice to
Ed?
be here, and I'm pleased to be with this group.
Awesome. Ed?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Nice to be here with you today. My name is Ed Probst. I am one of the founding partners at Vanguard Benefits. We work with nonprofits and for-profits as well, but we work with many nonprofits, helping them design strategies that help them attract and retain talent, become employers of choice, or what we like to call Hall of Fame employers. I have the particular expertise over the last 25 years of looking at benefits from both the lens of an employer and employees, as we've done literally thousands of employee interviews. So I think we can add some guidance on what employees are really looking for in their employers. So nice to be here with you all.
Sounds good. All right, so we're going to start off with the question to all the panelists that are here with us today. So with 45% of nonprofit employees considering leaving by 2025, how can nonprofits compete with for-profit salaries using creative benefits, flexible working options, or mission-driven engagement strategies? Jill, do you want to kick us off on that one?
Sure. So we generally cannot match the salaries of for-profits, and so it really is incumbent on nonprofits. And as you all know, and you've heard with the challenges over the last years of really creating compelling total value propositions. And I think that's really around flexible benefits where there can be, mission alignment in terms of addressing employees' needs. And we certainly know that the nature of work has changed so drastically that those organizations that are hearing their employees and recognizing that priorities have changed are going to be the most successful.
Good. Doug, how about yourself?
Very tricky question for me from a employment law compliance standpoint. So I'm just going to touch upon some of my concerns when it comes to increasing salaries and affording flexible benefits, etc. There are different classifications that nonprofits are able to avail themselves of. Either an employee, an independent contractor, or a volunteer. And the line between them is sometimes very blurry. And what could happen is if a nonprofit classifies a person as an independent contractor when they're actually looking like and smelling like an employee, they're going to be exposed to liability to the taxing agencies and to the employee or to that person, him or herself, because of the misclassification. The reason why I say that they could subject themselves to liability is that, for example, the discrimination laws don't protect independent contractors. They do protect employees. Um, um, Also, there's a classification that are used only in the nonprofit world, not in the for-profit world, of volunteers. And sometimes there's a blurry distinction between a volunteer and an employee. We had a case several years ago where we had a represented a nonprofit who used volunteer bus drivers, and one of the bus drivers ended up driving a bus on almost a daily basis. And at some point, he said, I feel like an employee. I look like an employee. I'm going to file a claim with the New York State Department of Labor. And he did, and he succeeded, and he prevailed, and he received money because, again, even though he started out as a volunteer, we started treating him, the client started treating him as an employee. So, one of the things that nonprofits have to remember is that the volunteer can't replace paid staff to do the work of paid staff. That's one of the big factors. And by the way, the regulations, the laws, the regulations are essentially the same, whether it's under federal law, under the Fair Labor Standards Act, or state law. And by the way, every state law is going to have the same regulations involved.
Well, I think that's a great point from a legal standpoint is, you look at a lot of businesses, nonprofit, for-profit, that are opening up their doors between remote work and everything else and spreading their reach on everything. And you do see this where, I've fallen and I've seen it where, some clients that we, have worked with where they assume that because someone's able to work remotely in Zoom and everything, they'll treat them as a 1099 contractor. Or the person will say, hey, I want to be a 1099, but then when something hits the fan, then next thing you know, they're like, wait a minute, I probably should have been treated like an employee, and then they could submit a claim. So that's a great perspective from that kind of part.
Sure.
Ed, going back on kind of, your expertise is kind of the benefits packages here. How can nonprofits kind of work within benefits and kind of maybe enhancing those benefits and creatively designing them?
Yeah, I think the key is to take a total rewards approach to providing your benefits. I think a lot of times, often we look at benefits as just something, it's a necessary evil. We have to provide this for our employees. But if you take that total rewards approach to providing benefits and look at your benefit programs as a tool or a weapon, if you will, to arm yourself the best possible way to attract and retain talent, I think doing so you can see a lot of results in retention and recruiting. One of the keys to that is flexibility or customization, right? Your benefits package is not going to satisfy every single person in your company. There's going to always be people that have different needs, different family obligations, different statures, financially different status in their life. And how do you go about meeting most of the employees' needs or improving satisfaction? I think you need to have a lot of ability for customization. And I think what that entails is providing a lot of resources around education, maybe even one-on-one benefit consultants for each employee to help them design the package, and then have a robust menu of benefits that includes not just your core benefits like medical and dental and vision, which are basically, mandatory to succeed, but extending that to other lines of business like voluntary type benefits, EAP program, perk type benefits like pet insurance and things like that, or maybe even having a benefit package that has flexibility in your remote offers for work or hybrid workforces, and maybe even customized towards specific sectors of your population, people who are caregivers or parents that have young children, and helping improve the culture with that approach. So taking that total rewards approach can go a long way in casting a wider net over the employees and their employee satisfaction.
Right. And I think one thing to note is, you hear kind of total benefits package and everything, and that sounds great, but it also sounds costly, right? So I think what's really important is the working with someone that really could design that package really well, where potentially you're offering enhanced benefits that the employees are taking advantage of, but it's making them healthier, for example, and then that's going to cut down on your health benefits and population within there. So I think working very creatively and still being able to potentially cut costs here and creating those packages is important as well. So let me go on to the kind of the next question here. So DEI programs are starting to face some legal and political scrutiny in 2025. And one important thing with nonprofits is that, I think the issue here is considering nonprofits often need to hire and work with kind of the populations that they serve, which a lot of times are, DEI kind of groups. So I'm going to put this out to the panel. Doug and Jill, you guys may be a little bit more relevant here for this particular question, but how can nonprofits kind of grapple with this? And what are you seeing out there?
So I think it's important as we struggle through these challenges that we really focus on evidence-based practices. So what are the things that we can do that are improve our decision-making about how we recruit and how we retain, while ensuring that we're within legal compliance and we are not being scrutinized. And I think that the shift is really around moving our language from diversity efforts to some broader things around skills and experience, rather than the demographic outcomes specifically. So, whether it's around, creative things to do would be removing barriers, for instance, from degree requirements, because in fact, there may be a disproportionate impact if you have particular degrees that are required, and certain groups may not, in fact, have access to those degrees. The other thing is in terms of community. You can approach your community and try to draw them in, and also speak to hiring people that really have lived experience, right? It's not about diversity per se, but it's really focused on the evidence that can back up why you are focusing on hiring certain people. So it's really about broad questions, very consistent questions. It's about getting away from the mindset of this is a diversity effort, and it really being a perspective that's broader than that and looks at how do we bring people in that reflect what we do, have real life experience, and really can service our populations. And that's legitimate, and that is evidence-based.
Absolutely. Doug, from a legal perspective, with as far as with DEI programs now.
Yeah, so as we all know, I believe we all know, the landscape has changed. The political landscape has resulted in significant changes with respect to DEI. President Trump has issued executive orders essentially diluting or watering down significantly DEI policies. He's instructed the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission not to pursue certain claims which he felt arose out of unlawful DEI policies. So I think it's time for all nonprofits to review their hiring practices, to hire based upon skill, as Jill said, skills and needs rather than meeting quotas. Again, the landscape has changed, and one of the concerns that I've heard in our own in our own meetings, in our own nonprofit meetings, is how does a nonprofit deal with their constituency, where they're dealing with different races and national origins, et cetera. And I think that this, and I'm going to use a word that I've learned over studying this over the past few months, that I think nonprofits should become culturally competent. What that means is cultural competence is a form of social intelligence that enables people to work effectively across cultures. It's the ability to understand and work effectively with people from different backgrounds, including those who are culturally different from oneself. This would entail uh, training, leadership training, especially, so the nonprofits will have a better understanding and will be better able to integrate with the society in which they operate. So I think that's sort of the a, a benefit from a potential benefit from reducing the DEI initiatives, which is that there's a way around it and there's a way to deal with it, on a day-to-day operational basis.
Yeah. And just to piggyback on what Doug is saying, it's interesting if you take the term, when you look at DEI, you take the term diversity out, or you look at diversity in a very broad sense, right? Diversity and probably the most successful organizations have used diversity to look at diversity of thought, right? Diversity of approach, which is wonderful, right? But I think this administration is looking at diversity as people of color and so forth. I think that belonging and initiatives that bring people into the fold are critical at this time. And that is, the focus is not diversity. The focus is on, again, being emotionally intelligent, being intuitive, and bringing people in, including your community, and doing the outreach you need to do to really create a DEI environment without calling it such.
So I'm going to put another question out there to all the panelists. So remote work is becoming extremely popular. I think since COVID really kind of opened that door up during the pandemic, and now it's here to stay. There has been a little bit more of the call back to the office for some organizations and some large employers, but there are individuals that want to be in the office and also want to be hybrid. What are some of the biggest HR challenges kind of in managing these type of employees, and how can nonprofits really kind of work to creating productivity for those individuals? Because I think sometimes, I know personally I work hybrid. Sometimes I have a really productive day being in the office. Some, remote, you got people that have distractions, right? Distractions happen. And it's all about managing kind of those kind of distractions and being able to still put together, a solid work day that goes around. So I would love to hear the perspective of, kind of both Jill and Ed. It looks like we lost Doug, but I'm sure he'll join back on.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'll start. I think that one of the things you brought up is very true, and you have to understand that not everybody's the same. Going back to what I talked about, customization in the workforce, right? There are some employees that thrive working remotely and are self-motivated and are able to be extremely productive, either working hybrid or working fully remote. Others cannot, and they'll be the first to admit that they need to be, whether they're where they're working remotely is not conducive to them concentrating or focusing, whatever it might be. Some employees will tell you they'd rather be in the office every day. And so I think as an employer, it's important to understand who is what, and having a open line of communication so that you are really putting the players in the right spots. That said, there's a lot of candidates out there that's exactly what they're looking for, and they're working to shop employers, if you will, for those that will give them that flexibility in the workforce. So if you have that flexibility and thought process, and understand that there are there is a lot of both going on, and that you really can be productive with employees that are outside working on their own. I think you give yourself a better chance to not only be effective from a recruiting standpoint, but to elevate the productivity in the workplace. And some of the things you need to do, though, to make sure that you have to make sure that the employees that are working remotely still feel part of the team, that they're not left out there on their own, and they're involved in key decision making. They're involved in regular meetings. As managers, I think it's really important to make sure that you're checking in on a daily basis, one-on-one with that employee, even if it's just a 15-minute check-in, to make sure that that they're aligned with the company's goals and the organization's goals, and that everybody is feeling like they're part of the team. And there's a lot of different things that can happen, but you can also have, I think it's important to have fun activities for those employees as well, and maybe connect with them outside the work environment, or even have Zoom sessions where they're group sessions, and it could be anything from guided meditation to online fun games, things like that, team building exercises that includes both the remote and the in-person employees. So
Well, I
as long
think
as there's
what's
communication, yeah.
Yeah, kind of going on what you're saying, I think what's also important, as any employer, nonprofit, for profit, um, with remote employees, it's also the micromanagement kind of piece of things, right? You want to be able to manage your employees. You want to be able to make sure that they're engaged, to add, kind of what your point is, but it's also making sure that, am I micromanaging them? Everyone has different personalities. I think, kind of the big piece here from an HR perspective of things is, am I being too overbearing on this employee? Am I not being overbearing enough, or talking to this other employee? Again, some employees do enjoy kind of not being micromanaged. They like to manage their own schedule. They're very good at it. I think to one of the attendees that are here that just put a question in the chat, it's how do you balance that customization and not creating a perception of unfairness and discrimination? Because, how do you bring that employee that you weren't micromanaging at first, and now you're bringing them back in and saying, you know what, I do have to micromanage you a little bit. And then how is that not considered unfair? So, I love to hear kind of all of your points of view kind of along kind of those lines.
Sure, I'll chime in if I can, which is it's really, it's about communication, it's about setting expectations, and it's about performance and standards. And I think that when organizations are most fair, when they set boundaries, right? They give some leniency, but they let people know that if in fact performance is not where it needs to be, that they're going to pull back, right? And so it's not that dissimilar from situations where you're at work, and if someone's having a performance problem, the manager is going to address that. I also want to mention that, so I think it's around being intuitive. It's about seeing signals. I was supporting an organization where it was in the middle of COVID. Someone started to do heavy drinking at home, and the CEO was so in tune to that person's loneliness and some of that history. And so it was it was a delicate situation, but it really required being tuned in and communication. Just want to address very quickly, and this is a whole different area. I think we also need to be sensitive and speak to those nonprofits where people are doing direct service and they don't have the opportunity to work remotely. And so there's a great challenge and a great frustration. And I think it's incumbent on organizations to find ways to support those people somewhat differently.
Well, and I think from, kind of going to kind of Doug's kind of area of things, I
Yes.
think also from kind of a legal aspect of everything, it's making sure that you have clear and defined lines between and in your employees' policies and procedures kind of manual, what's the distinction between if you're working remote, what are the clear guidelines that are set up in your handbook? If you're kind of on site and you have to be face to face, you don't have that opportunity to work remotely and you're out there in the field working with the populations that nonprofits serve, what are the clear guidelines that go along with that? And, I think to Jennifer's point here in the attendees chat, there is a happy medium between each employee. And maybe like Jennifer's saying in the chat, there's kind of that micromanaging kind of negative connotation to those things. And it's to what Ed was speaking about before, is that it's not micromanaging, it's getting them engaged. We want to have touch points throughout the day to make you engaged. Not that we're micromanaging you. We want you to feel part of the team if you're working fully remote or in a hybrid kind of session and making sure you're still there.
Sure.
And Al,
Yep.
I'll just add to that. I think it's creating an environment where rewards are based on productivity, right? And and also making sure that everybody is on board with those goals and the productivity requirements, including management. Because when we talk about micromanagement, in a lot of cases, it might be that manager doesn't believe in remote work, and maybe it doesn't work for them in particular. So that person is constantly saying, what is that person doing at home? Are they getting their work done? Are they working as many hours as I am? So I think it's important to take a top-down approach and making sure that the leadership team is on board with, understands the goals of the organization and what they're trying to accomplish with their flexible, hybrid, or remote workforce, and making sure that they are managing the employees in accordance with that, because it really could be just as it could just be a person that doesn't believe in remote work, thinks that they work better if they're at their desk all day, and doesn't realize that the goals are based on, and the rewards are based on productivity and not the hours worked. And as far as Jill brought up a point about direct workers that can't work remote, and making sure they feel included and that are rewarded. I just went to an event for a client last week it was a recognition, an awards banquet recognition for the employees. And at that, what they did is they did monetary raffles based on employees' attendance. And they had varying levels of attendance that they could get to earn tickets into a raffle where they earn monetary rewards, which I thought was a really interesting way to go about it, and really shine the light on the.
I think that's a really innovative way of kind of engaging again your employees. Doug, from a legal kind of perspective as far as remote work is concerned.
Yeah, so I mean, there's so much on this topic. In addition to what Jill and Ed said, I'll start with the fact that the laws are the same whether an employee works from home or works in the office. So the wage and hour laws have to be recognized. And by the way, how does an employer ensure that they're paying the employee for all hours worked? There's a tendency, employees have a tendency when they're working remotely to work whenever they want, in the middle of the night, as long as they get the work done. And it almost becomes impossible for the employer to track the hours of the employee and the work. So it's important to set boundaries. It's important to set schedules. It's important to remember that the discrimination laws still apply whether an employee works in the office or works from home. It's important to remember that there are meal period laws in every state, which requires employers to permit their employees to take, a meal period, whatever the state law requires. There's a law in New York, for example, called the spread of hours pay law, which requires employers to pay their employees an extra hour at the minimum wage for every day the hours exceed 10. Again, unless an employee keeps track of those hours, and unless the employer keeps track of those hours, and unless the employer ensures what ensures that the employee abides by the schedule, they're exposing themselves to potential liability under the wage and hour laws, especially under the overtime laws.
Right.
Also, the employer has to remember that, you know, there's a technology security that they have to ensure of, because the employee invariably will be using a computer that is also used for, you know, for their own personal use and for their kids' personal use. So that
Right.
exposes the employer to liability.
Well, I
So
think that, you know, sorry to cut you off. I think that, you know, that's a great kind of segue into kind of our next question here. So Doug, I'll let you kind of finish up, and then we'll talk about kind of the next two questions that I want to make sure that we get to before the end of this.
sure. So the last point on this, though, is that when you know, we talk about productivity, there are methods that the employers can use to track the employees' productivity, and that's something that, you know, the employers want to ensure of. So it's really about compliance. It's about productivity. It's about you know, just ensuring that the employees will become the remote employees will become part of the corporate culture.
Awesome. So I think one thing that's really kind of big now, and if we're talking about technology, we got to talk about is the use of AI. AI is kind of a big hot topic. I mean, from an HR perspective, you know, I think what we're looking at is employees are looking for different tools to do their jobs more efficiently and effectively. And I think, you know, from a Doug perspective, as far as with a legal perspective of things, you know, we have all this technology access. A lot of it is open source, some of it's closed source, and there's legal ramifications that go along this. There's HR kind of compliance kind of perspective of things, of ensuring employees are following the guidelines that their employers are setting along this. So I would love to kind of hear from an HR perspective, you know, kind of AI and how it's affecting.
So I see, well, first of all, there's a first in the nation law in New York City that requires employers to ensure that they're not engaging in bias through the hiring process. And you know, there are actually required bias audits on a annual basis. You know, so I think it's only a matter of time before other states and, you know, cities and states adopt the same type of regulation to ensure that, you know, that the employers don't have a discriminatory hiring practice in using AI tools.
Okay.
So it's really like being aware of it and then staying on top of it, and you know, and do internal audits to ensure compliance and non-discrimination.
Ed, from a benefits perspective, you know, AI I think is very interesting because it could recognize trends in kind of the use of employee benefits. You know, some things that might have been very hard, very manual to try to review. And I think now you could kind of stick this statistics kind of in an AI, you know, software, and really come up with some of the statistics for benefits. So I would love to hear kind of from your perspective and how it's being utilized from a, you know.
Yeah, I think that from an underwriting standpoint, and from you know, in being in a position to evaluate outcomes to make healthcare decisions, it's starting to be used a lot more for that, for larger clients, you know, that are clients that are over 100 employees that actually have claims data that can be evaluated. It can be an impactful tool on trying to design strategies on a go-forward basis that can reduce cost. The thing about it is, I think we have to understand is that AI is not human, obviously, and there's much to designing benefit packages that are human related. So just like anything else, I think everybody's using AI to some capacity at this time and trying to customize it as best as they possibly can. But I think, you know, having that second look at this to ensure that that is not discriminatory is is important. For instance, I know one way that I'm seeing this being used is chatbots, right? And we've looked at adding chatbots to our website even to be able to help employees with making decisions based on their employee benefit needs. The thing about it is, I think that the human element is completely taken out of that, and relying on a chatbot to make a decision that is based on your welfare and your family's needs is a very that's something that I would really consider before doing something like that, because this benefits are personal, and there's no way you can communicate that to a chatbot and without question not have that be discriminatory or just be suitable for the family's needs. So I do think it's a very useful tool. I think as it evolves, it can evolve in that capacity too. But my message there would be, to use it with caution, to make sure that you're infusing the human element side to it as well, and combining with the data that they're providing you to make sure that that you're not just relying on what ChatGPT says or
Right.
any AI tool. And I think the other thing is, I'll be very quick with this, is you can use AI tools that are customized for your organization. So there are tools that are dedicated more towards nonprofits and other sectors. Well, I've seen in the last 2 weeks, I've seen CPAs, lawyers. So I think that would be helpful as well.
Joe, how about from an HR and kind of talent perspective of things, the
Sure.
use of AI in evaluating talent?
Right. So I think that foremost is that organizations, if you don't yet have policies, you really must have policies around AI use. And clearly the policy is very driven by making sure that there's not bias in the hiring. The things that you're asking in the technology in AI, making sure that the questions are open and fair to everyone, and then using human judgment, right, when
Right.
you're making decisions around the information you're getting from AI. So I think it's a really sensitive thing, and I think it's important for organizations to really pay close attention to making sure that there is not implicit bias in
That's
the
good.
use of AI. Right.
Sounds good.
And I think that that's also important to have consent, to have the data privacy, and to really put in that human piece of overlaying policy with
Right.
some good judgment.
All right. So last question as we finish up kind of the last 10 minutes, a little bit less than 10 minutes here. So looking to 2026, what are some kind of emerging HR trends that are out there that we have to be kind of aware of as nonprofit employers? Doug, do you want to kind of take that first?
Sure. So the laws are changing, but the laws are changing to the point that they are affecting the bottom line of for-profits and nonprofits. Literally, new laws are coming out, every few months in every state. For example, many states now require employers to provide a certain number of sick days to all their employees. So that's something that's considered. It has to be considered, and it has to be evaluated on as far as like how it affects the bottom line. So what happens is the laws come out, compliance is required. The employers then have to evaluate the impact of compliance on the company, and it may entail cutting costs by reducing the number of employees, or it may entail certain other cost cutting measures or revenue raising measures. So again, compliance is one thing, but it has to be looked at in the context of the overall operations. And I think that, regular self audits would be probably the biggest, advantage to a nonprofit to evaluate, the impact of these new laws on the bottom line.
Right. Jill?
Sure. I think what's very significant that is we're moving in this direction, and I think we will continue to, is really skill-based talent strategies. So rather than hiring someone for experience, and this goes a little bit into the DEI thing, right? It's about looking at skills and capabilities. So organizations are getting somewhat away from very structured jobs and job descriptions. And one of the things that this does is it gives people developmental opportunities. And that is clearly what we're hearing from the workforce in terms of wanting opportunities. I think that we're looking beyond the traditional credentials and looking at, behavioral interview questions and identifying capability, right? And then the onus is on the employer to really help create the skills, to develop the skills for employees. Right. I think there's a big restructuring of work that is happening in the future.
Ed, what are some of the trends that you're seeing going into 2026 as far as benefits?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, I will say from a perspective of medical insurance, which is going to be one of the top expenses to an organization. We're seeing some volatility in the marketplace, especially locally. Larger groups getting hit with higher increases and carrier reductions in the small group market. I think everybody's seen what's going on with United Healthcare over the last week. So I would prepare for some volatility potentially in the near future to increase. And just explore all opportunities. We're seeing more nonprofits look at self-funding or alternative funding methods like medical expense reimbursement programs. The other thing I'll say is a continued emphasis on wellness and mental health resources. There is going to be an expansion of the Mental Parity Act coming up again next year, and it will require that you look more at your benefits to ensure that they're not favoring non-mental health benefits and they're equal. So there's a lot of things that employers can do that really won't cost a lot of money to enhance their wellness and mental health resources. I mean, things like if you're a larger group, talk to the insurance companies about what they can offer from perspective of wellness credits. Even for smaller organizations, shine a light on what the carrier provides, like EAP programs or gym reimbursements, things of that nature. But then there's a lot that as an employer that you can do from a perspective of mental health, even making an arrangement with a local mental health provider to give discounts to your employees. So that they, those that maybe don't have mental health providers that are in network can find somebody that can help them. So there's a lot of different types of benefits that you can provide that really won't cost the organization a lot of money from a perspective of wellness and mental health. And I think you will continue to see it go in that direction. So I would look at that a lot.
Sounds good. So I'm gonna fit in this one last question here. So where can an employee refer to continuously in an effort to keep up with the different changes in the law? So basically, what's a good reference guide that an employee or even an employer could consistently look at just to keep up with all these changes that are happening in the law? Doug?
Yeah, consult with your friendly labor attorney, but that's a joke.
There we go. I like that, Doug.
Really, it's a nonprofit should have somebody who's understands the laws and understands compliance, and if that doesn't exist, really bringing in an HR consultant on a regular basis to ensure compliance.
Well, I think
That's
that's probably one of the most important things, right, Doug, is working with professionals, because the ever-changing environment is just changing so quickly here.
It is.
So
That's what I see.
everyone, it was great having you guys, Jill, Ed, Doug. Thank you so much
Sure.
for joining us today, giving us very insightful information. And to everyone that is continuing to join us today and join the other sessions, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the NFP conference that we have today. Thank you guys so much, and everyone have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You.
Too.
Okay,
Thanks, Al.
no problem. Take care.